Hello friends, a big warm welcome to our very own channel Ammu and You, where I am Ammu and I am here with another beautiful story to narrate to you. The story is named The Troll, written by Sanjeev Sanyal. The compound of Seaview Cooperative Housing Society occupied a 50-yard stretch on a quiet side lane leading off the commercial hustle-bustle of the main road. The name of the housing complex was a bit misleading as the sea was visible only on low smog days from the kitchen windows of the top floor in Block B. However, the people staying there took pretty pride in their society. Mrs. Deshpande, a resident, tied her hair into a bun, picked up her high-power Nikon camera and stepped into the corridor. She went outside her flat, took the elevator to the top floor of the building, shutting the collapsible door of the lift as soundlessly as possible, and took a deep breath before examining the landing minutely. Over the next 20 minutes, she walked down the 15 floors, examining the corridors and stairwell on each floor, taking note of every civic misdemeanor and every maintenance failure. Kids' cycles blocking the passage, exposed wires hanging from the ceiling, and so on and on. Now, she was collecting all this information to email the most incriminating material to Mr. Mir Chandani, the long-suffering president of Seaview Cooperative Housing Society. She liked sending such information to him. By the time Mrs. Deshpande finished sending the emails to the society president, it was lunchtime. She reheated leftovers from the previous night's dinner and ate quickly. There was no time to waste. After clearing off the table, she opened her laptop once more. This time, she logged into her Twitter and Facebook accounts and was transformed into bubbly Bento, among the most feared of social media activists. The housewife had discovered this universe quite by chance, but now it consumed her. Every day, when her husband and daughter were out, she waged war against all the ills of the world. The deliberately misleading statements of public intellectuals, the blatant lies of well-known journalists, the corruption of politicians and corporate lobbyists, and the hypocrisy of self-proclaimed human rights activists. She pressed home her point with any kind of evidence she could lay her hands on. Statistics, references, articles, and screenshots of old Facebook and Twitter posts. No one knew the true identity of Bubbly Bento, but the handle quickly became hugely influential. Even its targets admitted privately that the quality of its research was impeccable. It soon had a legion of ardent followers on all major social media platforms. There had been many attempts to guess the identity of Bubbly Bento. Some followers were of the opinion that it was run by a senior diplomat in Delhi, while others believed it was a group of bored software professionals in Bengaluru. Then there was those who thought it was an economist based in Singapore who pretended to be a writer. Mrs. Deshpande tracked all this with amusement. She even inserted deliberately misleading updates. Edinburgh is so beautiful, covered in snow. How I crave a hot cup of tea. When in Manhattan, I always make a pilgrimage to Morimoto. Biryani standards have declined in Lucknow. Electronics have become so expensive in Singapore. Does anyone know a good place to buy a drone? The middle-aged housewife sitting in a middle-class Mumbai housing block had never visited any of these cities and had no intention of buying a drone. But each of these updates set off a flurry of speculation. Meanwhile, her husband and daughter remained blissfully unaware of her online activities. The only change they had noticed was that the wife, mother, appeared to have become unusually well informed about current affairs. The growing social media power of Bubbly Bento, not surprisingly, came to the notice of TrueNews.in, a blogging site that positioned itself as the last refuge of fearless journalism. In reality, it was run as a sly front for publishing articles that suited the political and commercial interests of those who financed it. Between gossipy articles about Bollywood and scholarly articles on obscure topics, it inserted personal attacks on inconvenient individuals cleverly couched as investigative journalists. When Bubbly Bento began to release details of suspicious accounts held in forest tax havens, the editors of TrueNews.in were told to hunt down the person behind it. Was Bubbly Bento anywhere located in India or abroad? Was it an individual or a group? The best in-house hacker failed to crack the password. It was then that one of the editors noticed that the earliest tweets by Bubbly Bento had included a series of complaints about municipal issues in Mumbai. The editors of TrueNews.in handed the investigation over to one of the most promising reporters in Mumbai, Shubhranshu Ghosh Roy alias Shubho. Around 36 years old, he had remained a student at the Film and Television Institute of India for the last 14 years. Despite the best efforts of his teachers, he had somehow managed not to graduate. Shubho considered himself a misunderstood artist ahead of his time. So his investigation began. The obvious place to begin the assignment was to scout all the Saha and Sangvi outlets to try and find a match with Bubbly Bento's photographs. It was on the third day that he discovered the lane. The details matched the photos exactly. The still overflowing garbage dump, the Gulmohar tree, and of course the Saha and Sangvi outlet, where the lane hit the main road. There stood the Seaview Cooperative Housing Society. He came to the conclusion that the housing society was the most likely location of his query. On returning to his hostel room, Shubho reported to the editors that he knew with fair certainty where Bubbly Bento lived. He poured out all that he had found out to his roomie. The roomie recalled that a former classmate, now a successful advertising executive, had lived in Seaview for several years. This was a stroke of luck. The very next day, Shubho went to meet the advertising executive and pumped him for information about the inmates of Seaview. After hearing, Mr. Bajaj was the obvious suspect. He was the previous chairman. Shubho needed personal verification and decided to use an additional piece of information he had gleaned. The fact that Mr. Bajaj went for a walk every morning. It would be a good opportunity to observe the man in his natural habitat. The dawn was still breaking in when he parked the motorcycle across from Seaview. Everyone in the building seemed to be asleep. Shubho waited, but he was very cold. How he wished for a hot cup of tea. Sure enough, there was a man at a small stall, stirring milky tea and pumping the stove. What luck! The hot tea really lifted his spirits. But there was still no sign of Mr. Bajaj. Now, after 40 minutes into the wait, Shubho faced a new problem. The chill and the tea had conspired to bring his bladder close to bursting. The security guard was still fast asleep. Sea View inhabitants seemed to be stirring. There was no real signs of Mr. Bajaj emerging. Shubho glanced up and down the lane to make sure there was no one around. Then he sidled up to the nearest wall and let loose. Up on the 6th floor, Mrs. Deshpande had just woken up and was preparing tea and breakfast for the family. She peered through the window and saw a bearded man urinating just outside the gate. In a flash, she reached for a trusted Nikon, zoomed in and took a series of high-resolution photographs. She then calmly went back to the toaster. Having unburdened his bladder, Shubho felt a lot better. A few minutes later, an elderly man with a thick white moustache came out of the gate. He seemed to be Mr. Bajaj. Now, he wrote the article with full evidence and conviction that he had cracked, and Bubbly Bento was no one but Mr. Bajaj. Mrs. Deshpande did not fail to notice the article. She was most amused by the identification of Mr. Bajaj of all people as Bubbly Bento. However, she was also taken aback by how close the investigator had come to finding her. She did not fear what the world would have said if she had been discovered. She was mostly afraid of the scolding that she would have got from both her husband as well as her daughter for getting mixed up in things that did not concern her. Housing society politics was one thing, national politics was quite another. 3 months later, after publishing the article, Mr. Bajaj one day died peacefully in his sleep. To the end, he remained entirely oblivious to his fame in the social media world. It's not clear how Shubho found out about the death, but a few weeks later he published a condescending obituary in truenews.in. The first half of the piece summarized the previous article, but the rest was used in a somewhat self-congratulatory note to hint at how he had played a role in silencing a social media ogre. This time he fearlessly published the article in his own name and even attached a mugshot. Mrs. Deshpande too read the article. She then looked at the photograph of the author and felt that she knew the face from somewhere. A quick scan of her old photographs confirmed her suspicions. Here was the same man in flagrante delicto, exposing his privates in high resolution. She smiled. Then she logged in and for the first time in months typed, "I am still here." Oops. What a beautiful twist to the story, and what an amazing Bubbly Bento, the troll. Friends, I'm sure you've loved this story. Please like, share and subscribe. Press the bell icon to be updated with the channel for all the new videos that I upload. Your comments will make me very happy. Thank you for all your support and encouragement in the journey of my storytelling. Thank you so much for listening to the story, and I'll take leave for now. I'll come soon again. Till then, stay happy, stay blessed.